Hello, everyone, and welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time joining us. This is Truck Talk with Liz, and I'm your host, Liz Astor. The idea here is pretty simple. I drive around in Euro Truck Simulator 2, hauling whatever needs hauling, and we just talk about things, ideas, stories, maybe a bit about the places we pass through. It's meant to be a calm, relaxing, just a space to think while the miles roll by. The whole crew is here with me. Maxwell the Cat found his usual spot curled up next to me. Mish the Fish is sitting comfortably on the passenger seat, and André the Skull is hanging around. Tonight, or rather this very late evening, it's just gone 10:30, we're starting a long one. We're in Kandalaksha, up in the Murmansk Oblast in Russia, picking up a load of sawdust panels. Destination? Acre, way down on the Mediterranean coast. It's going to take us through a fair few countries, across seas. It'll be a whole adventure. And it's April, so we should see spring unfolding as we head south. Right now, though, it's dark, and we're pulling out of Kandalaksha. Alright, Kandalaksha, way up here on the White Sea coast. It feels remote, doesn't it? You can almost imagine the northern lights painting the sky on a clear winter night. Though it's spring now, so maybe less likely. It's a place shaped by its environment. The sea, the forests, the cold. Historically, it's been significant for trade, for industry, timber, like these sawdust panels that we're hauling, mining too. Places like this often have a complex relationship with the resources around them, you know. People build their lives on them, industries rise and sometimes fall, leaving their mark on the land and the community. It's got that stark, subarctic beauty, but there's a toughness to it as well. Mish, you got any historical vibes? Mish the Fish says. Oh, definitely. You can feel the layers of history, Liz. The pomors, the trade routes, the strategic importance during different eras. It makes you think about how communities adapt and survive in challenging environments. It's like reading a really dense historical manga, layers upon layers. André the Skull turns to me and says, the Pomors were East Slavic settlers, primarily from Novgorod, who explored and settled the White Sea coasts from the 12th century onwards. Their economy was based on salt making, fishing, hunting, and trade. Thanks, André. Always good to have the specifics. And speaking of layers and challenges, that brings me to what I wanted to talk about on this trip. It's a thought experiment, something called the prisoner's dilemma. Maybe you've heard of it. It usually goes something like this. Two people, let's call them Tanya and Sink, get arrested for robbing a bank. The police puts them in separate cells, no way to communicate. The prosecutor doesn't have enough evidence for the main charge, but they do have them on a lesser charge, say, illegal firearms possession. So the prosecutor goes to each one of them separately and makes an offer. Look, the prosecutor says, you can confess to the bank robbery or you can stay silent. If you confess and your partner stays silent, you walk free. We'll use your testimony to put your partner away for a long time. If they confess and you stay silent, they walk away free, and you do the serious time. If you both confess, you'll both get convicted, but I'll recommend shorter charges, maybe early parole. But if both of you stay silent, all I can get you on is the gun charge, which means just a short token sentence for both of you. They each have until the morning to decide, leaving a note with the jailer. Now, Tanya and Sink, they care more about their own freedom than each other's, so what should they do? Think about it from Tanya's perspective. What if Sink stays silent? Well, if Tanya also stays silent, she gets the short gun sentence. But if she confesses, she walks free. Walking free is better than a short sentence. Okay. Now, what if Sink confesses? If Tanya stays silent, she gets the long sentence. But if she also confesses, she gets the shorter parole sentence. Again, a shorter sentence is better than a long one. So, no matter what Sink does, whether he stays silent or confesses, Tanya is better off confessing. And the exact same logic applies to Sink. No matter what Tanya does, he's better off confessing. The dilemma is that if both follow this seemingly rational self-interest, they both confess, and they both end up doing the parole sentence. But if they both stay silent, they would both have gotten only the short gun charge sentence, which is better for both of them than the parole sentence. It's this strange little puzzle where individual rational self-interest seems to lead to a worse outcome for everyone involved compared to if they had somehow managed to cooperate, even though that cooperation seems irrational from each other's standpoint. It raises questions about trust, cooperation, and what rationality even means, especially when we think about groups versus individuals. We'll unpack that a bit more as we drive. Okay, we've crossed the border, leaving Russia behind, and now we're in Finland. The landscape feels similar, yet different. Still, lots of trees, lakes, it's vast. We'll be heading south through here for a while. We're gonna pass Kemijärvi soon, and next up is Rovaniemi. Mish the Fish says, "Rovaniemi, that's where Santa Claus village is, right? Can we stop, please?" Not on this schedule, Mish. We've got sawdust panels to deliver, remember? Maybe next time. Besides, it's April. Probably his off-season. André the Skull turns to me and says, "Rovaniemi is the administrative capital and commercial center of Finland's northernmost province, Lapland. Its location on the Arctic Circle has aided its tourism industry. The Santa Claus village is indeed a major attraction." See, Mish? André knows. Okay, back to our dilemma. Game theorists, the people who study these kinds of strategic situations, like to represent it with a little grid, a matrix. Let's call staying silent cooperating, C, and confessing defecting, D. So, if both cooperate, CC, they both get their reward payoff, R, that short gun sentence. If both defect, DD, they both get the punishment payoff, P, the parole sentence. If Tanya cooperates and Sink defects, CD, Tanya gets the sucker payoff, S, the long sentence, and Sink gets the temptation payoff, T, walking free. And if Tanya defects and Sink cooperates, DC, Tanya gets the temptation, T, and Sink gets the sucker, S. The whole dilemma structure relies on how these payoffs rank. The temptation, walking free, has to be better than the reward, short sentence. The reward has to be better than the punishment, parole, and the punishment has to be better than the sucker payoff, long sentence. So, T is greater than R, which is greater than P, which is greater than S. Now, remember how we figured out that confessing, defecting, seemed like the best move no matter what the other person did? That's called a dominant strategy. Deflecting dominates cooperating because you always do better, or at least not worse, by defecting. And in the basic prisoner's dilemma, defecting is a strictly dominant strategy. You always do strictly better. When both players have a dominant strategy, like they do here, the outcome where they both play it, DD, is called a Nash equilibrium, named after John Nash, the mathematician. André, do you have a more crisp definition? André the Skull turns to me and says, a Nash equilibrium is a state in a strategic game where each player has chosen a strategy, and no player can benefit by changing their strategy while the other players keep theirs unchanged. In the standard prisoner's dilemma, defect is the unique strict Nash equilibrium. Exactly. It's stable in a way. Neither Tanya nor Senk can improve their own situation by unilaterally switching from confessing to silence, assuming the other person sticks with confessing. But again, that DD outcome is worse for both of them than the CC outcome they could have had. That's the kicker. It's why Flood and Drescher, who first formalized this back at the Rand Corporation in the 1950s, thought it was a counterexample to the idea that Nash equilibria are always the natural solution to a game. Sometimes the equilibrium point isn't the best place to be, collectively speaking. I always find it so fascinating how during the spring and summer months, the norther and norther you go, the earlier the sun rises. It certainly makes driving a bit easier. We're just about to pass through Tornio, right on the border with Sweden. It's practically a twin city with Haparanda on the Swedish side. Mish the Fish turns to me and says, "Twin cities? Like right next to each other across a border? That sounds fascinating. Imagine the cultural mix. Is the border just a line on a map there?" Pretty much, Mish. There's a river, the Torne River, but the towns are very integrated. People cross back and forth all the time for work, shopping, visiting. It's a neat example of how borders can be both very real political lines and quite porous human spaces. They even share things like a golf course that straddles the border and even crosses a time zone. André the Skull turns to me and says, "The Tornio-Haparanda border is often cited as the world's most peaceful border. The towns cooperate extensively on municipal services and cultural initiatives. Due to Finland being in the Eastern European time zone and Sweden in the Central European time zone, there is a 1-hour time difference across the river." Okay, now we're properly in Sweden. We're passing Haparanda, then Kalix, Luleå, long stretches of road ahead. Looks like we might get some rain soon too. Clouds are gathering. So, we've looked at the basic symmetric PD, where the payoffs are the same for both players. But what if they aren't? What if, say, Tanya has more to lose from a long sentence than Sink does, or maybe the prosecutor offers slightly different deals? That gives us an asymmetric PD. The court logic still holds if the payoff ranking of T being greater than R being greater than P being greater than S holds for each player individually, even if their specific values for T, R, P and S are different. Defection remains the dominant strategy for both, and DD is still worse for both than CC. Things get a bit more nuanced if we relax the conditions slightly. What if defection only weakly dominates cooperation, meaning it's always at least as good and sometimes better? That can happen if, say, the temptation is only equal to the reward, T being equal or greater than T, or the punishment is only equal to the sucker payoff, P being equal or greater than S, while the other strict inequalities, R being greater than P and T being greater than S or P being greater than S, still hold. In these weak PDs, deflecting still seems like a rational choice, even if the DD outcome isn't strictly worse than both than CC, maybe just for one. The dilemma's still there. And then there's the idea of cardinal payoffs. So far, we've just talked about the order, which outcome is better. But what if we assign actual numerical values representing how much better one outcome is than another? This opens up possibilities like mixed strategies. Maybe Tanya decides to flip a coin, confessing with probability P and staying silent with probability 1 minus P. If you plot the payoffs on a graph with Tanya's payoff on one axis and Sink's on the other, the four outcomes, CC, CD, DC, and DD, form points. The space between these points represents the possible expected payoffs from mixed strategies. Sometimes the point for mutual cooperation, CC, lies inside this space. That means there might be a mix of strategies, like both confessing sometimes and cooperating sometimes, that could lead to a higher average payoff for both than pure cooperation. This is called an impure PD. A pure PD is one where mutual cooperation, CC, is already on the boundary of that space, meaning no mix of independent strategies can do better for both players simultaneously. André, do you remember the condition for the pure symmetric PD? André turns to me and says, in a symmetric game with cardinal payoffs, the prisoner's dilemma is pure if the reward payoff is greater than or equal to the average of the temptation and sucker payoffs. Mathematically, R is greater or equal to half of T plus S. This is sometimes referred to as the RCA condition, after Rappaport, Shama, and Axelrod. Right, it ensures that straight-up mutual cooperation is optimal among independent strategies. You can't make both players better off by mixing things up independently. Here comes the rain, doo-doo-doo-doo. We just drove through Skellefteå, and we're now heading towards Umeå, Gonna take it a little bit easier on these wet roads. Maxwell doesn't seem too bothered, he's just kinda snoozing away. You know, thinking about these payoff structures reminds me of a book I read recently. Mish, you're probably gonna like this one. It's quite layered. It's called Stag Dance by Tori Peters. It's actually 4 thematically interconnected stories. Actually 1 novella and 3 short stories. Mish the Fish turns to me and says, "Oh, interconnected stories? Like a shared universe? What are they about?" Well, they're complex. They deal with identity, desire, bodies, queerness, the past, the future, all in ways that are really raw and real, but also kind of wild and mythical sometimes. One story is set mostly at this illegal logging camp, snowbound, feels like a different time altogether. The characters have these intricate relationships, motivations that aren't always straightforward, payoffs that aren't just about simple self-interest. Reading it made me think about how these neat little game theory models like the PD try to capture human interaction, but reality is always so much messier, richer, and more contradictory. The way the stories reflect on each other, changing how you see the earlier ones, is brilliant. Highly recommend. I wouldn't say it's an easy read though, but it's deeply affecting. It explores how we navigate the world, the selves we present, the selves we are, and the selves we aren't, or maybe are? It definitely challenges simple binaries, which feels very personal to me. Rain stopped, made good time through that stretch. Okay, looks like we need fuel. Pulling into the station near Söderhamn. Maybe while I'm refueling you can go and click on the mystery link in this video's description. Right, tank's full. That was 1,526 euros. Fuel isn't cheap, especially on these long hauls. I'm gonna factor that into the bottom line. Back on the road, it's gonna get dark again as we head towards Stockholm. Looks like we'll be catching the ferry from Nynäshamn tonight. Okay, we're back on solid ground. That was a long ferry ride from Nynäshamn, 19 hours across the Baltic Sea. Cost 531 euros for the passage. Good chance to catch some sleep, though Maxwell probably just found new napping spots on the boat. We've landed in Gdansk, Poland. Gdansk, a city with so much history, especially in the 20th century. The shipyards, solidarity, echoes everywhere. We're gonna head south through the Kujawian-Pomeranian voivodeship. Polish countryside rolling by. Let's get back to our dilemma variations. What if, instead of just cooperate or defect, there was a third option? Some games add a neither N move. Imagine a game where payoffs are ordered, T being greater than R, being greater than P, being greater than S still, but defecting isn't always the best. Maybe if the other person chooses N, you're better off cooperating than defecting. In a setup like that, defecting isn't dominant anymore, but the outcome DD might still be the only equilibrium. That is, if both are defecting, neither can improve their situation by unilaterally switching to C or N. This is an equilibrium PD, distinct from a dominance PD, where D strictly beats C no matter what. A specific variation of this is the optional PD. Here, the third move, N, is like opting out or refusing to play that round. The payoff for opting out, let's call it O, is usually set somewhere between the punishment, P, and the reward, R. So, R is greater than O, which is greater than P. Think about the matrix now. If you cooperate and they cooperate, you both get R. If you cooperate and they defect, you get S, they get T. If you defect and they cooperate, you get T, they get S. If you defect and they defect, you both get P. If either of you chooses opt out, N, you both get the opt out payoff, O, regardless of what the other person did, C, D, or N. Now, defecting isn't dominant. If the other person cooperates, you are still tempted to defect, T is greater than R. But if the other person defects, you might be better off opting out if O is greater than P, than cooperating, S, or even defecting, P. And if the other person opts out, you get O no matter what you do. Interestingly, mutual defection, DD, isn't necessarily an equilibrium anymore, because either player might prefer to unilaterally switch to opting out, N, if O is greater than P. Mutual opting out, NN, can be an equilibrium though. Some researchers, like Orbel and Dawes, looked at this optional game, especially when the opt-out payoff is 0, O is equal to 0. They had this interesting idea. Maybe people base their expectations of others on their own tendencies. A cooperator might be more likely to expect cooperation from others than a defector would. If that's true, and if the potential rewards for cooperation are high enough, a cooperator might be more willing to engage, play C or D in the optional PD than a defector, who might just opt out, more often fearing exploitation. And under some conditions, this tendency could actually lead to cooperators getting higher average payoffs than defectors in the long run, because they successfully engage in more mutually beneficial interactions. It suggests that just having the option not to play can change the dynamic significantly. Mish the Fish turns to me and says, "So, choosing not to play can be a strategy just by itself, right? You know how, like in some anime, where a character refuses a duel they know they can't win honorably, right?" Kind of like that, Mish. Sometimes stepping back is the smartest move, or at least it opens up different possibilities than just charging ahead. Rolling through Lesser Poland now. We're gonna pass near Krakow, another city just steeped in history and culture, and Wadowice, birthplace of Pope John Paul II. Fingers crossed, by the way. I sent in my application, and I hope they accept. I think the world is ready for a Pope Joan II. It's night again, the road lit only by our headlights and the occasional passing vehicle. Crossing into Slovakia now, waving goodbye to Poland in the rearview mirror. We're gonna pass through Banska Bystrica, Zvolen. The terrain is definitely gonna get more mountainous here. Feels different. Just like that, we're in Hungary. Morning light, heading towards Budapest. Won't be going right through the city center, but you can feel the pull of a major capital even from the outskirts. The Danube is around here somewhere, a constant presence in this part of Europe. Now, the prisoner's dilemma isn't just about two people. A lot of real-world situations that feel like PDs involve many players. Think about the tragedy of the commons, a phrase popularized by Garrett Hardin. Imagine a shared pasture, the commons, that everyone can use. Each farmer is better off letting their own cow graze on the rich common land rather than their own smaller plot. But if too many farmers do that, the commons get overgrazed and become useless for everyone. This has the PD structure. The temptation is getting the benefit of the commons without paying the cost, by keeping your cow on your own land, preserving the commons. The reward is getting the benefit and paying the cost. Everyone limits grazing, common stays healthy. The punishment is getting no benefit because the commons is ruined, and the sucker payoff is paying the cost, limiting your own grazing while others don't, and the commons still gets ruined. T is greater than R, which is greater than P, which is greater than S. This sentiment holds again, more or less. This model fits a lot of situations, depleting a shared resource like fish stocks, polluting a shared environment like a lake or the air, deciding whether to contribute to a collective effort like volunteering or donating blood. Everyone benefits if enough people cooperate by limiting pollution, conserving water, volunteering, but each individual might feel tempted to defect, pollute a little bit more, use a little extra water, let someone else volunteer to save themselves cost or effort, especially if they think their small action won't make a difference, or if they can benefit from others' efforts, the free rider problem. There's also the foul dealer version, where your defection doesn't just let you avoid a cost, it actively harms others to benefit yourself. Think of people lying on job applications when only one person can be hired. If everyone is honest, fair chance. If one person lies, they might get the job, harming everyone else's chances. These multiplayer versions add complexity. Unlike the two-player PD, where DD is the only equilibrium, these commons games can sometimes have multiple equilibria. Universal defection, everyone overgrazes, is often one. But sometimes a state where just enough people cooperate to sustain the resource, the minimally effective cooperation level, can also be in equilibrium. If you are a cooperator in that state, switching to defection might ruin the resource for everyone, including you. If you are a defector, switching to cooperation might not bring much extra benefit if the resource is already sustained. But reaching that cooperative equilibrium is hard. How do you know how many others are cooperating? How do you coordinate? Especially when the effects of defection are delayed, like with climate change, the damage isn't immediately obvious after one person drives a gas guzzler. So, even if cooperative equilibria exist, we often slide towards the tragedy of mutual defection. We can model these with different payoff curves too. Sometimes cooperation only helps once a threshold is passed, like needing a majority to win a vote. Other times, every bit of cooperation helps incrementally, like reducing pollution. The shape of these benefit curves changes the exact nature of the game. Sometimes it looks more like a multiplayer stag hunt, cooperate if others do, or even chicken, cooperate if others defect, defect if they cooperate. But the core tension often remains. The lure of individual benefit versus the potential for collective good or collective disaster. We're now in Romania, and the rain is back to greet us. Okay, need another fuel stop. Another tank topped off. 1,377 euros this time. The price of progress, I guess, or just the price of diesel. Let's get rolling. now by the city of Orshava. That's right on the Danube, near the Iron Gates Gorge. It's a spectacular part of the river, where it cuts through the Carpathian mountains. Huge dams there now, generating a lot of power, but also changing the landscape and displacing communities when they were built. Another one of those complex relationships between human needs, technology, and the environment. Hey, Mish, you'd find the history and the natural beauty here equally compelling, I bet. Mish the Fish turns to me and says, "The Iron Gates, yes, so much history here. Roman legions, Ottoman battles, and the incredible power of the river itself, and the dams. It makes you think about the cost of energy, doesn't it? Like in Magie Lumiere Magical Girls Incorporated." You know, Mish, that's a great connection. I just finished watching that anime series you recommended, Magie Lumiere Magical Girls Incorporated. Mish the Fish says, "Did you like it? Did you? It's great, isn't it?" I really did. It's such a clever take on the magical girl genre. Setting it up as a startup company, dealing with the logistics, the paperwork, the HR issues, alongside fighting supernatural pests, it grounds the fantasy in this relatable, mundane reality. The main character, Kana, just wanting to be helpful, finding her place in this unusual company. It's very charming, but what really struck me, like you said, is how it touches on bigger themes. The environmental impact of Kai outbreaks, the ethics of the magical solutions, the pressures of work culture. It manages to be fun and thoughtful at the same time. It makes you think about how even extraordinary work becomes, well, work, with all its compromises and challenges. And that actually ties back into another interpretation of the prisoner's dilemma, the intrapersonal one. Now, forget about Tanya and Sink for a moment. What if the prisoners are different parts of yourself? Philosopher Gregory Kafka imagined it like this. Suppose you're trying to decide on a snack. Part of you, let's call it Arnold, is health conscious. Arnold prefers a granola bar, then maybe orange sherbet, then nothing, and chocolate gelato last. Another part, Epi, is all about taste. Epi wants the gelato first, then sherbet, then nothing, and the granola bar last. Now, imagine these two sides of you can either insist on their top choice or acquiesce to a compromise, the sherbet. If both acquiesce, you get sherbet. If Arnold insists and Epi acquiesces, then you get the granola bar. Arnold wins. If Epi insists and Arnold acquiesces, you get gelato. Epi wins. But if both insist, maybe you get frustrated and end up buying nothing. If your preference is sherbet, then gelato, then granola bar, then nothing, then Arnold and Epi are in a PD. Arnold is better off insisting whether Epi insists or acquiesces. Epi is better off insisting whether Arnold insists or acquiesces. So they both insist, and you end up with nothing, even though both would have preferred the compromise, sherbet. It's a way of thinking about how internal conflicts, different desires pulling in different directions, can sometimes lead us to outcomes that aren't actually what any part of us really wanted most. like Kana in Magie Lumiere, trying to balance her desire to help with the company's bottom line or procedural rules. Speaking of energy and impact, we have the Rovinari power station, one of Romania's largest coal-fired power plants. You can see the scale of it even from here. Necessary for the grid, employs a lot of people, but coal power comes with heavy environmental costs. It's a visible symbol of those complex trade-offs societies constantly navigate, often structured like massive, slow-motion prisoners' dilemmas. The short-term economic temptation versus long-term collective environmental well-being. We just passed near Hunedoara, known for Corvin Castle, which is supposed to be amazing, like something out of a fantasy novel. But now we're near Sebeș. This area, Transylvania, has a fascinating history with the Transylvanian Saxons who settled here centuries ago. Sebeș has one of those impressive fortified churches they built. History leaves such visible layers on the landscape. Hey André, anything to add about Sebeș? André the Skull says, Sebeș, known as Mühlbach in German, was one of the 7 main Saxon-founded cities, Siebenbürgen, in Transylvania. Its large Lutheran church, begun in the 13th century, incorporates significant Romanesque and Gothic elements and was heavily fortified against Ottoman incursions. The city was historically important for crafts and trade. And now we are in Sibiu. What a beautiful city. It was a European capital of culture a few years back. Amazing architecture, the old town squares, you can really feel the history here too. A blend of Romanian, German and Hungarian influences. Definitely a place worth visiting properly sometime. The weather forecast says that there's gonna be a little bit of rain coming in soon, but hopefully it will clear up before we get to Bulgaria. Now we're gonna head to Pitești and then Bucuresti. We are now skirting by Bucuresti, and then we're gonna head towards the Bulgarian border at Rusa. It'll be morning soon. And there we go, sun's up again and the rain is about to stop. We just crossed the Danube on the Giurgiu-Ruse bridge. This bridge is a big deal, used to be called the Friendship Bridge. It's one of the main links between Romania and Bulgaria over the Danube, carrying road and rail traffic, a vital artery for trade and travel in this region. Bridges like this, they physically connect places, but they also represent connection, cooperation, or sometimes bottlenecks and points of control. Well, this is a little bit embarrassing, but my computer decided not to record any sound from the video game from this point onwards. I will try to compensate for that by putting some ambient piece of music in the background. Hopefully it doesn't get too monotonous. Anyways, on with the show. Bulgaria rolling by, we're just about to pass by Veliko Tarnovo, the old medieval capital. It looks quite dramatic perched on its hills. Then we're gonna head towards the Black Sea coast, towards Burgas. Okay, let's pick up another thread of the PD. What if the two prisoners, Tanya and Singh, are really similar, like twins or even perfect replicas? There is this controversial argument that says if you know your partner thinks and acts almost exactly like you, maybe it is rational to cooperate, stay silent. Because if you cooperate, they're highly likely to cooperate too, giving you R. If you defect, they're highly likely to defect too, giving you P. Since R is better than P, you should cooperate. This sounds a bit like the famous Newcomb's problem. You know, the one with the two boxes. One transparent box has $1,000, an opaque box might have $1 million or nothing. A super reliable predictor put the million in the opaque box if and only if they predicted you would take only the opaque box. If they predicted you'd take both boxes, they left the opaque box empty. So, what do? Taking both boxes seems dominant. Whatever is in the opaque box, you get $1,000 more by taking both. That's like defecting in the PD. But if the predictor is reliable, taking only the opaque box means it probably has the million, giving you a much higher expected payoff. That's like cooperating. So what is the link? Imagine a PD where R is equal to $1 million, S is equal to $0, T is equal to $1 million plus the $1,000, and P is equal to $1,000. Cooperating is like one boxing, defecting is like two boxing. The argument for cooperating in the replica PD is like the argument for one boxing. The argument for defecting is like the argument for two boxing. This leads to debates about different kinds of decision theory. Evidential decision theory, EDT, says you should do the action that gives you the best outcome given the evidence. Since you're choosing to cooperate is strong evidence your replica or twin will also cooperate, leading to R, EDT might recommend cooperating. However, causal decision theory, CDT, says you should do the action that causes the best outcome. Since your choice doesn't cause your replica's choice, they just happen to be correlated, and defecting causes a better outcome for you regardless of what they do, T is better than R and P is better than S, CDT says you should defect. Most game theorists stick with the causal reasoning. You can't affect the other player's independent choice, so you should defect. But the replica or Newcomb scenarios highlight that our intuitions can get tangled when actions and outcomes are correlated but not necessarily causally linked. André the Skull turns to me and says, "The decision hinges on whether one maximizes utility based on conditional probabilities, P, outcome or action, as in EDT, or based on the probability of outcomes conditional on the action being performed, often representing using counterfactuals or causal models, P, action leading to outcome, as in CDT. The debate remains active in decision theory and philosophy." And here is the port of Burgas, right on the Black Sea. It's a huge facility. You can see the cranes, the ships. It's a major hub for cargo coming in and out of this whole region. Ports are fascinating intersections of global trade, logistics, labor, complex systems keeping things moving, or sometimes not moving, depending on circumstances. Alright, approaching the Bulgarian-Turkish border. Let's see how this goes. I just got a notification that says, please pull in for a vehicle inspection at the nearest way station. Okay, standard procedure sometimes, especially with cargo. Let's see what they say. The message says, your total weight is 41 tons. You may proceed. Good. No issues there. And we're into Turkey. Edirne, the old Ottoman capital before Istanbul, famous for the incredible Semiliye Mosque. History just layered deep here. Gonna have to refuel soon too. Okay, 1067 euros lighter, but the tank is full. Let's keep moving towards Greece. We're about to reach Uzunkurbu. André the Skull turns to me and says, Uzun Köprü means long bridge. It refers to a significant early 15th century Ottoman stone bridge over the Aegean River, one of the longest stone bridges in the world at the time of its construction. A nearly 600-year-old bridge still standing and giving its name to the town. That's impressive longevity. Okay, Greek border coming up next. I just got a notification that says proceed to the X-ray inspection inside the building ahead through the rightmost gate. Okay, a bit more thorough this time. I guess they want to look inside the trailer without unloading it. Okay, I just got told that the X-ray inspection has been passed successfully. I may continue. Excellent. And we are now officially entering Greece. Getting closer and closer. It's getting dark again though. Rolling towards Kavala on the coast. That's where we're gonna catch our next ferry. Alright, we're now in Kavala and we're about to get on the ferry to Chios. It's gonna be an 11.5-hour trip and it's gonna cost us 1,521 euros, but it's gonna be a good time for me to take a break from driving. Back behind the wheel on the island of Chios, famous for its mastic trees, I believe. It's raining here too. Just a short drive and then we'll catch the next ferry, this one to Piraeus, the port of Athens. That's a 9-hour trip and it's gonna cost us 840 euros. and we've arrived in Piraeus, the port of Athens. This place is huge. Ferries going everywhere, container ships, cruise lines. It's the main gateway to the Aegean islands and a massive commercial port for the whole Mediterranean. You can feel the energy, the connection to both ancient history and modern commerce. Okay, another ferry awaits, and this is the big one, Piraeus to Limassol in Cyprus. 36 hours at sea, cost a whopping 2,199 euros. Definitely catching up on sleep this time. See you on the other side. Land ahoy! We've made it to Cyprus, driving from Limassol towards Larnaca. Feels distinctly Mediterranean here, warmer, different vegetation. Just a short hop across the island before our final ferry. Now, while we were talking about variations, there's another game closely related to PD called the Stag Hunt. The story comes from Rousseau. Two hunters can cooperate to hunt a stag, which requires both of them and provides a big meal, the best outcome, R. Or, either hunter can abandon the stag hunt and individually catch a hare, which guarantees a smaller meal. Let's call this payoff T, temptation, even though it's not much of one here. If you hunt stag and your partner hunts hare, you get nothing. The sucker payoff, S. If you both hunt hare, you both get a small meal. Let's say this is the punishment, P, though it might be the same as T. The key difference from the PD is the payoff ranking. Here, the reward for mutual cooperation, stag, is better than the temptation of defecting alone, hare. So, R is greater than T. We still assume that R is greater than P and P is greater than S. Typically, T is greater or equal to P. A matrix might look like this: stag C, hare D, stag C, RR, example 4-4, hare D TS, example 3-0, stag C ST, example 0-3, and hare D PP, example 3-3. Here, unlike the PD, there are two Nash equilibria, stag-stag and hare-hare. Both are stable in the sense that if you know the other person is hunting stag, your best move is to hunt stag too. If you know they're hunting hare, your best move is hare. It becomes a game of assurance or trust. Can you trust the other person to go for the better but riskier cooperative outcome? If you're unsure what the other will do, you might look at the risk. Hunting hare guarantees you a payoff of 3, P or T. Hunting stag could get you 4, R, but risks 0, S. If the guaranteed payoff for defecting, hair, seems safer or more likely given uncertainty, you might defect even though mutual cooperation is better. This leads to the idea of the risk-dominant equilibrium, hunting hare in our example, versus the payoff-dominant equilibrium, which would be hunting stag. The stag hunt models situations where cooperation is mutually beneficial and stable if achieved, but fear or lack of trust can trap players in a less desirable outcome. This feels relevant to a film I rewatched recently, John Carpenter's Escape from New York. Mish the Fish turns to me and says, "Oh, that's the one with Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken. He's so cool in that. He wears this eye patch." Yep, that's the one. Kurt Russell as Snake, the cynical anti-hero forced into this impossible mission in a dystopian future Manhattan turned prison. What struck me rewatching it was how it plays with trust and cooperation, or the lack thereof. Snake doesn't trust the authorities forcing him into the mission, and rightly so. He has to rely on other inmates, the resourceful Brain, the loyal Maggie, the cheerfully pragmatic Cabby, but these alliances are temporary, fragile, born of necessity. They need each other to survive the immediate threat, like hunters needing each other for the stag, but everyone's ultimately looking out for themselves, wary of betrayal, ready to cut ties when the job is done, or even before. The Duke, the main antagonist of the film, runs his own gang, a form of cooperation, but it's based on power and fear. The whole atmosphere is one of pervasive distrust. Snake survives by being cynical, by expecting the worst, often choosing the hare instead of the stag, basically self-preservation and immediate escape over the potentially better but riskier cooperative ventures. The film's got this fantastic gritty style, great score by Carpenter himself, and that iconic performance from Russell. It captures that feeling of navigating a broken system where trust is a luxury few can afford, much like the players stuck in the risk-dominant equilibrium of a stag hunt. Now, another way to change the dynamic is to make the moves asynchronous. One player moves first, and the second player knows the first move before making the roan. Think of Hume's example. Two farmers need to help each other's harvest, one today, one tomorrow. Farmer 1 helps Farmer 2 today. Cooperate. Tomorrow, does Farmer 2 help Farmer 1 cooperate, or just take the help and run, defect? Knowing Farmer 1 already helped, Farmer 2 is tempted to defect, T is greater than R. Farmer 1, anticipating this rational defection, realizes helping today will just make them a sucker, S. So, Farmer 1 defects on day 1, and they both end up with nothing, P. Making the move sequential doesn't solve the dilemma if players are purely self-interested and can commit. This is sometimes called the trust game structure. Player 1 decides whether to trust player 2 by cooperating first. Okay, final sea leg. Larnaca, Cyprus to Haifa, Israel. 9 hours, 432 euros, almost there. We have arrived in Israel, driving from the port in Haifa. Now, before we conclude this journey, and as we drive through this particular place, there is something I need to say, and it is important. This is not a debate. What is happening to the Palestinian people is not complicated. It is not both sides, and it is not a difference of opinion. It is a humanitarian catastrophe, the result of decades of violent occupation, apartheid, and systematic dehumanization. And in these past 2 years alone, the Israeli state has committed clear and documented war crimes, from bombing hospitals and killing medics, to displacing nearly the entire population of Gaza, to using starvation as a weapon. I stand with Palestine, fully, unconditionally, and I condemn, without hesitation, the actions of the Israeli government and military. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. If that offends you, you're free to leave. This space is not for those who excuse ethnic cleansing, who look away from genocide, or who defend power over justice. My platform will never be neutral in the face of oppression. Silence is complicity, and I won't be silent. Free Palestine, always. We finally made it. Acre. Such a historic city, right here on the coast. Crusader fortress, Ottoman architecture, a harbor used for millennia. A place where countless different groups have interacted, cooperated, conflicted. Seems like a fitting endpoint for our discussion on the prisoner's dilemma. It's just a simple game, really, but it opens up so many questions about rationality, self-interest, collective action, trust, evolution, how cooperation emerges or fails to, in all sorts of contexts, from individual choices to grand societal challenges. There are no easy answers, just fascinating complexities. Well, that's it for this trip. Thanks for riding along, folks. I hope you found it relaxing, maybe a little thought-provoking. Actually, there were quite a lot more ideas I wanted to talk about regarding the prisoner's dilemma, but this video is already pretty long, and I was thinking of maybe making a supplementary video. If anybody would be interested in that, just leave a comment below. As always, I'm curious what you'd like to talk about next time. I've put up a poll over in my community post page with a few ideas. You could also comment underneath this video with other potential ideas. Maybe you want to talk about something regarding urban design, or the history of automation, or perhaps a deep dive into a particular type of cargo. Head over there and cast your vote. Let me know what you'd be interested in. Until next time, this has been Truck Talk with Liz. Drive safe, be kind to each other, and keep thinking. Bye now.